I've always believed that hospitals are where life begins, not where it ends. But sometimes, the place we trust the most becomes the most dangerous. It started in a quiet neonatal unit, a ward meant for the tiniest, most fragile lives. And among the nurses, there was one who seemed kind, gentle, devoted. Her name was Lucy Letby. I remember the first time I saw her photo, a smiling young nurse in a blue uniform. Everyone said she had a heart of gold. But behind that calm, caring smile hid a secret so dark, it would shock an entire nation. It's a story of betrayal, of silence, and of justice delayed. This is the terrifying case of Lucy Letby, the nurse who killed for fun. When I began looking into this case, I realized it wasn't just about murder, it was about trust, and how blind that trust can become. Lucy Letby wasn't the kind of person anyone would suspect. Born in Hereford, raised in an ordinary family, she had dreamed of being a nurse since childhood. Her colleagues described her as polite, soft-spoken, and always helpful. But as I would learn, evil doesn't always shout, sometimes it whispers, right beside a hospital crib. Between 2015 and 2016, something strange began to happen inside the Countess of Chester Hospital. Infants who had been recovering suddenly collapsed without explanation. One after another, lives were lost, and Lucy Letby was always there. At first, no one questioned it, because who could imagine that the nurse offering comfort might also be the cause of the tragedy? But as the months went on, the coincidences became too many. Doctors began to notice a pattern, and one name that kept appearing. Still, their concerns were brushed aside. Lucy was described as kind, dedicated, hardworking. She was even praised for her professionalism, but behind the calm surface, something far darker was unfolding. When investigators finally stepped in, they began to uncover a story that would horrify an entire country. What they found changed everything. When the first whispers about Lucy Letby reached investigators, no one wanted to believe it. A nurse? A neonatal specialist? It didn't make sense. But the medical records told a story that couldn't be ignored. Between June 2015 and June 2016, a series of unexplained medical emergencies occurred in the same ward. Different babies, different conditions. Yet the timing, the pattern, even the sudden collapses, all aligned. And in nearly every case, Lucy Letby was present. Senior doctors began to take notes, tracking every shift, every incident. By mid-2016, the pattern was clear. But instead of being removed from the hospital, she was quietly transferred to an administrative role. No charges, no warnings, just silence. That silence lasted for years, until 2017, when police opened a full investigation. They called it Operation Hummingbird. I spoke with one detective who described those early months as chasing shadows through hospital files. No fingerprints. No witnesses. No weapon, just data. And one repeating name. Investigators went through hundreds of pages of medical records. Each time something went wrong, Lucy was there. Each time she was off duty, nothing unusual happened. Then came the messages. Police recovered conversations she'd sent to colleagues. Even when she wasn't working, she'd ask about specific infants. Sometimes within hours of an unexplained incident. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to raise alarms. Then came the breakthrough. During a search of her home, police discovered handwritten notes. On one of them were 6 chilling words. I am evil. I did this. Some argued it was the confession of a guilty mind. Others said it could be guilt or stress. But when matched with the timeline of events, it became the key piece of evidence. By 2019, detectives were confident they had enough to act. Lucy Letby was arrested 3 separate times as the investigation deepened. Each time, she denied everything. Calm, polite, emotionless. In November 2020, prosecutors charged her with multiple counts connected to the deaths and harm of infants under her care. And as the case reached court, the world watched in disbelief. Colleagues, who once trusted her, were called to testify. Parents faced the unbearable task of reliving their loss. The truth about the hospital's denial began to surface. It wasn't just a crime. It was a failure of a system built on trust, and that trust had been shattered beyond repair. The trial began in 2022. I remember walking into the courtroom for the first time. Every seat filled with journalists, families, and investigators who had waited years for this moment. Lucy Letby sat quietly at the defense table. Her expression gave nothing away. No tears, no anger, no sign of remorse. Prosecutors presented months of evidence, the medical charts, the text messages, and those personal notes. Experts testified that the incidents followed a pattern too deliberate to be coincidence. The defense argued that she was being scapegoated. They blamed hospital systems, human error, and flawed data, but piece by piece, the evidence told a different story. One investigator told me she wanted to be seen as the hero, the nurse who reacted first when tragedy struck. She created the crisis so she could fix it. Psychologists described her as a personality obsessed with control and attention. She didn't crave money or power, she wanted sympathy and admiration, a dark hunger to be at the center of every emergency. The trial lasted for months. Families gave heartbreaking testimony, doctors relived the moments they had doubted their own instincts, and through it all, Lucy remained silent, calm, almost detached, as if watching someone else's life unfold. When the verdict was read, the courtroom went still. Lucy Letby was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, one of the harshest sentences ever handed down in Britain. As she was led away, there was no reaction, no apology, no visible regret. Outside the courthouse, parents wept quietly. Reporters whispered that the verdict brought justice, but not closure. When I stepped out into the gray afternoon air, I felt the same relief that the truth had been proven, but sorrow for every family whose trust had been betrayed. This story isn't just about one person. It's about how power, trust, and denial can mix into something deadly. It's about how institutions sometimes protect their reputation more than the innocent, lives in their care. And it's a reminder that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it wears a nurse's uniform. Outrow, Global Crime Stories. This has been Global Crime Stories. If this story opened your eyes, please like, share, and subscribe. Every week, we uncover the real crimes that shook the world and the hidden truths behind them. Because justice isn't just about verdicts. It's about remembering and never looking away.